During the Vietnam War, the United States lost more than 5,000 helicopters in combat and operational accidents. No other conflict in history recorded such extensive destruction of this type of aircraft. Even with advanced technology, intensive training, and massive military investment, thousands of these machines were shot down, damaged, or simply disappeared into the jungle. How was this possible? Why did one of the greatest military innovations of the 20th century also become one of its greatest vulnerabilities? This is the story of how the skies over Vietnam became one of the deadliest environments ever faced by military aviation. In the early 1960s, the United States entered the Vietnam conflict facing a completely different scenario from previous wars. There were no defined fronts or clear lines separating allies and enemies. The Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army operated in small, mobile units, hidden in dense forests, isolated villages, and complex tunnel systems. Roads were constantly mined, convoys were ambushed, and ground patrols rarely knew where the next attack would come from. In this environment, moving troops by land was slow, predictable, and extremely dangerous. To overcome this problem, American strategists decided to take the war into the air, creating the doctrine of airmobile warfare. The idea was simple: use helicopters to transport soldiers, weapons, and supplies directly to the battlefield, bypassing natural obstacles and surprising the enemy. This offered unprecedented speed, flexibility, and reach. In practice, however, it meant exposing pilots and crews to constant danger. For many of them, the day began before dawn, with quick briefings, scribbled maps, crackling radios, and a silent tension in the air. Most were barely in their 20s and had limited experience. Within a few months, they went from basic training to real missions in combat zones. They knew that every flight could be their last, yet they kept taking off. The ultimate symbol of this new form of warfare was the UH-1 Huey. Rugged, versatile, and relatively easy to operate, it became the backbone of American operations in Vietnam. It carried troops, evacuated the wounded, served as a command platform, and even provided improvised fire support. Within a few years, thousands were in service. Despite its effectiveness, the Huey had serious limitations. It had minimal armor, a lightweight fuselage, vulnerable systems, and exposed engines. It was not designed to withstand heavy, sustained fire. Its main defense was mobility and pilot skill, something that was not always enough. Operations followed a relatively predictable pattern. Helicopters flew low, following rivers, roads, or clearings, trying to stay hidden from enemy observation. As they approached the landing zone, they drastically reduced speed and descended rapidly. At that moment, they lost almost all ability to evade. They became easy targets. Enemy machine guns, rifles, and rocket launchers opened fire almost simultaneously from carefully camouflaged positions in the vegetation. Within seconds, the area turned into a killing field. A single well-placed shot could hit the engine, rotor, or cockpit, causing the helicopter to lose control and crash into the jungle. At the beginning of the war, the Viet Cong had few resources to counter aircraft. However, as they observed American patterns, they quickly adapted. They created improvised air defense networks using heavy machine guns, anti-aircraft rifles, RPGs, and captured weapons. These positions were set up near likely landing areas and dismantled immediately after attacks, making retaliation difficult. Often, pilots only realized they were under fire when it was already too late. There was no time for evasive maneuvers or to call for support. Over the years, the environment became even more hostile. Helicopters flew dozens of missions per week, accumulating intense mechanical wear. The tropical climate worsened the problem, with torrential rains, extreme heat, sudden fog, and unpredictable winds. Instruments failed, engines overheated, and hydraulic systems malfunctioned. In addition, makeshift runways and unstable landing zones increased the risk of accidents. Many helicopters were lost without a single shot being fired, simply due to technical failures or errors caused by crew exhaustion. Among all operations, the most dangerous were medical evacuation missions known as dust-off. When a soldier was seriously wounded, a rescue request came immediately over the radio, often while fighting was still underway. Pilots knew the area was not secure, yet they landed anyway. Under enemy fire with limited visibility and extreme pressure, they tried to extract the wounded in seconds. Many helicopters were destroyed in these operations, and countless medics, pilots, and crew members died trying to save others. These missions represented both the greatest risk and the greatest symbol of courage in airmobile warfare. To reduce losses, the U.S. Army tried to adapt. It created protected flight formations, alternative routes, and introduced dedicated attack helicopters such as the AH-1 Cobra, responsible for neutralizing enemy positions before landings. Additional armor plating was installed, and new approach tactics were developed. In some cases, these measures worked. In others, the enemy simply shifted positions and exploited the terrain. The jungle offered nearly limitless hiding places. No advantage lasted long. By the end of the conflict, the numbers revealed the scale of the problem. More than 5,000 American helicopters had been destroyed. Thousands more were damaged. About 4,000 crew members lost their lives. In many squadrons, turnover was so high that experienced teams rarely formed. Veteran pilots were constantly replaced by newcomers who had to learn under real fire. Some survived hundreds of missions. Others did not make it past their first dozen. Survival seemed to depend as much on skill as on luck. The Vietnam War was the first major conflict fought daily at low altitude, within the range of almost any light weapon. Never before had helicopters been used on such a scale, and never before had aircraft of this type been so exposed. They lacked heavy armor, advanced defense systems, and a significant margin for error. They flew low, slow, and visible, in an environment dominated by jungle and unpredictability. That is why more than 5,000 helicopters were destroyed. Because every mission involved extreme risk, every landing was a gamble against chance, and every takeoff could be a silent farewell. Even so, these machines transformed the way wars were fought, enabled previously impossible operations, and saved thousands of lives. They paid, however, an extremely high price.